Welcome to another episode of the Long Bay Symphony's Speaking of the Arts. I'm Music Director Charles Evans. Today I continue my exploration of the wide variety of people who have moved to and have become an integral part of this fast-growing community. I'll be speaking with Horry County Schools English teacher Esther Yardumian-Smyth, who also happens to be the daughter of Richard Yardumian, the famous Armenian-American composer whose music is played by orchestras around the world. I hope you enjoy our conversation. This interview falls in the category of some I've done in previous episodes, the idea of it's amazing who you run into in a place like Myrtle Beach, who has moved here. So joining me is Esther Yardumian-Smyth, and many might know her as an English teacher at the Academy of Arts, Science, and Technology in Myrtle Beach. So Esther, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
But of course there's a richer history here, because come to find out, her family name, Yardumian, is the name of a very well-known Armenian-American composer, Richard Yardumian, who was very popular during the days of the old Philadelphia Orchestra, and Eugene Ormandy championed his works. So I just thought it might be interesting to just talk a little bit about that history. It's fascinating. And I guess first of all, I'd just be curious, what brought you here to Myrtle Beach? Or the Myrtle Beach area, I should say, the Grand Strand.
Well, I am from Philadelphia. I was born and raised there and taught there for a couple of decades. And my husband is older. He had lived in New Orleans, and actually that's where we met.
Oh, that's quite a switch.
Oh, yes. And when we moved back up to Philadelphia, we both took master's degrees at Villanova University later in life. And I went from one career to another, became a teacher, and he went from being a he was a regional sales manager for Ragu, spaghetti sauce, and then he became a therapist, a counselor. So
it's a nice switch.
Yeah.
It's nice to have a success story and a career switch.
Yeah, and he switched careers at the age of 55. I was 42. So it really was a midlife or late life career change. In any case, we each had our careers in Philadelphia for that couple of decades, and then decided we wanted to move back down south. We had friends in Pawleys Island.
Oh, okay. Did you ever consider going back to New Orleans?
No, never. Okay. By that time, it was a different city. Yeah. And we met there, but that was the best of it for us, really. But we had friends here, and we came to visit them, and they encouraged us to look around, and we found a wonderful, affordable home in Pawleys Island, in Pawleys Plantation. The most affordable thing was the property taxes.
Oh, of course. That attracts everybody around here.
I learned that later.
Yeah, and that is, I think, part of the idea of like, wow, this person has moved here, and this person is related to that, and it's just, there's such a wonderful pool of people here, and that's why I want to have interviews like this, just to explore the richness of it.
Yeah.
Because there's so much history behind what you did. I did want to say, and you know that you were discovered by our former board president, Ray Hyder, who lives in your neighborhood.
Exactly.
And you guys got to talking. Did he ask you about your name? Did he ask if it
No.
was... How did he...
No, it was so random. I've been running for 50 years, and I'm one of the few who... everybody laughs at me because I slog. It's called a slow jog now. Oh, okay. But I was slogging by... I knew that he knew classical music, if for no other reason than that I always heard it coming out of his house.
Yeah.
And sometimes there would be cars.
Yeah, he's a big Spotify fan.
And he would have musicians playing there, and I'd think, I want to get invited to one of his gatherings.
Yeah.
But one day, he just happened to ask me if I were a subscriber to the Long Bay Symphony. And I said, yes, I actually am. My husband and I go to the concerts, and we have to go to Myrtle Beach High School on a Sunday afternoon.
And
I wish it
all
were down here.
Right?
So he told me what his position was, and we talked for about, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes, and I said, I gotta go. And he asked me how I came to know classical music. And I said, well, I grew up in a classical music world. My father was a composer. Oh, who was he? Richard Yardumian. And that was it. And then the very next day, he flagged me down again.
Yeah.
I've been listening to your
Yeah.
father's music.
Yeah, he's an avid listener, and when he grabs onto an idea, he'll just check all these things out. He's been really very helpful about programming and coming up with some new ideas
Yeah.
with what we do, and we intend to include one of your father's pieces in future seasons, because it's just great. But you know, I really want to talk about that whole milieu, that whole old Philadelphia world, because we were talking earlier about that fact that we're talking about the Philadelphia of the Philadelphia Orchestra of Stokowski and Ormandy, and of course the Curtis Institute.
Right.
And it's funny, when I was interviewing Chris Beatty, who is Samuel Barber's nephew. Of course, he was talking about the early Curtis days. Samuel Barber was in the first class at the Curtis Institute, and your father was right in that same fold. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that context.
Well, actually, I found something where I have a quotation from my father about that. His brother,
Right, yeah.
his brother Elijah, his older brother, was a pianist
At Curtis.
at Curtis. He was one of the early classes as well. And where is this? Oh, here. It's right on the front. To quote my father, "Our home was frequented by instrumental and voice students from Curtis Institute when it first opened its doors.
Yeah.
Most of them have enjoyed important musical careers. Some even went on to musical fame."
Yeah.
So early on.
There's a very good chance that Samuel Barber was
Probably
in
one
the
of
house.
them.
Yeah, yeah. It was just such an amazing atmosphere in those days, and many of you might remember the great original Fantasia. That sort of was an important marker for the prominence of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and certainly of the stature and personality of Stokowski.
Yes.
But then Ormandy came on his heels, and
Yeah, for
and
about
that-
42 years.
Yeah, yeah, and of course those who were buying albums back in the day, I mean, the branding of the Philadelphia Orchestra and Ormandy, I mean, they recorded everything, including many of your father's works. In
Yes.
fact, that was the thing. I think, now correct me if I'm wrong, but back in that time, I think that the ethnic elements in certain music was very attractive, and I just think of, as a parallel, the other Armenian composer people would know, Aram Khachaturian.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Hovanya.
Oh, yeah, that's true too.
Hovnanian.
But you know,
yes.
the saber dance. If nothing
Yes,
else, people
I
know
do.
the saber dance.
Yes.
And there are, you know, that's from the Guyane Ballet, and it's just full of this. In fact, you know, Khachaturian wrote all sorts of instrumental works, and his works are imbued with the same kind of thing that your father put into the works. In fact, it's stated in all of the, you know, bios and so on, that we're dealing with Armenian folk music and his religious background. So,
Both.
yeah, tell us a little bit about all that.
Well, his mother was an organist for her church, but her greatest influence on her son was that she sang these folk hymns, tunes, songs from the Armenian heritage. They came over. She was Armenian, of course, but she came over without ever speaking English or really learning to speak English. So this is what kept their culture in their family, their ethnicity bound, because of her singing these to her children.
Yeah.
And it greatly influenced both Elijah, my father's older brother, and my dad.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just that kind of appeal that interested Ormandy in it, because it is Armenian Suite, which
Yes.
he wrote as a teenager.
Yes, 19. But he scored it for piano.
Right.
And later was told to put it to orchestra.
Right, and then I guess Ormandy even asked him to add to it. So. And then Ormandy championed the work, and it's been played, of course, all over. It's probably his most
famous.
popular and famous work.
Yeah, and
But several others, you know, his Second Symphony and things like that have been, you know, And you were mentioning also, this is kind of an interesting thing, because as an active living composer and renowned composer, the way someone like Samuel Barber as well would have been during those days.
Mm-hmm.
So your father was commissioned to write, I thought this was fascinating, was it to write, was it a mass?
Oh yeah, much of his work during the 50s and 60s was commissioned. And even
right, and that's the luxury of being a famous composer. You don't have to write and then see if people will play it. They're asking you to write.
Yeah, one of the great pianists of that era, of the 40s and 50s, was Rudolf Rkushny.
Oh yeah.
He commissioned the piano concerto, but never recorded it.
Oh wow.
It was recorded later by John Ogden and some others, John Pennick, but never for Rkushny himself.
Huh.
However, interestingly, the Free Library of Philadelphia, where my father studied, in their Fleischer collection, found an acetate of Rkushny playing the piano concerto.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they just got in touch with Penn, who has the archives, and let them know that. So isn't that incredible? But now, what were you asking me? Something about the commission of the Mass.
Right.
Well, Fordham University Jesuits were on a mission to find a sacred music composer who could write a mass. They may even have been tasked to do it. Could write a mass in English when the liturgy changed from Latin to English. So that would have been in the mid-ish 60s.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I know that when they found my father, he maybe it was a little bit earlier, 63 or 4. When he wrote it, it was premiered at Lincoln Center by the Chamber Symphony of Philadelphia Orchestra under the baton of Anshel Brusiloff.
Right. Yeah.
And then my father and Theodore Pitcairn, a patron of the arts, a benefactor of my father's, my mother and 2 Jesuit priests from Fordham went to Rome and presented that to the Pope in 1967.
Wow, well, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, it's just fascinating to hear about the connections that we were talking earlier too. Again, that old Philadelphia thing. I was a student of Anshel Brusiloff's in Dallas when I did my master's at SMU. And, just an incredibly gifted musician. And
Yes.
I can remember for conducting lab, we had the orchestra there, and one of the things we were doing, I think because there was a student playing the Beethoven Violin Concerto, we had that as something we would work on. Any kind of concerto, to develop your listening skills so you could adapt if the soloist did something funny. So he just got a violin out of the orchestra section, out of the first violin section. Let me have your fiddle. He hadn't looked at this for years. He played the entire first movement while I conducted from memory. And threw me all these curves.
Fantastic.
That just,
Incredible.
There was just such a wealth of talent. That was really such a center. It still is. I mean, Curtis is one of the most distinguished conservatories.
Well, actually, Brusiloff and my father met at Philippe Monteau's conducting school, or camp, I think it was, in Maine. Gosh, and I don't even know when, maybe the 40s, and became very close friends before Brusiloff was a concertmaster of the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and they had a lifelong friendship and worked together with Philadelphia Orchestra and then later with the Chamber Symphony of Philadelphia that Brusiloff was the concertmaster for. I mean, the music director for.
Yeah. Well, so how much were you in the middle of all of this activity? Like you went to premieres and
Oh yes, every time there was
chatted with Ormandy and
one of the we were very close friends with Uncle Gene and Aunt Gretel. Yes, and we used to go to.
I heard he liked to drive very fast.
Yes, well we were never allowed in the car with him.
Yeah, my old teachers who played in the Philadelphia Orchestra, grew up and went to Curtis in the Dallas Symphony.
Oh yeah,
a lot of Philadelphia folks there,
okay.
and they used to tell me stories about Ormandy, just like getting in accidents and stuff. He was a very fast driver.
Yeah, we were never. Well, actually, every Friday afternoon there was a 2:00 concert for the Philadelphia Orchestra, and we were taken out of school. I remember this. We felt very important because we got to leave school and go downtown. And after the concert, after we went to the green room to see Ormandy and some other, whomever might have been the soloist or other musicians, we would go then to the Bellevue Stratford where Ormandy and his wife Gretel lived, and we would have dinner with them. So, but that was a walk, that was just across the street from the Academy of Music, or it was right next door to the Academy of Music.
When you said we, how many is we?
Oh gosh.
Because you're from a family of 13 children.
Yes.
So how many of those were?
That's a very good question, because by the time I was in school, my older siblings, my brother Vahan, Sam, was in the Navy. My sister Miriam was probably at University of Colorado. They're a decade older, so they may have already been through this and been gone.
Yeah.
But my father's closest friend and a patron of the Philadelphia Orchestra, Theodore Pitcairn, had a proscenium box at the Academy of Music, and we sat there.
And that's at the old Academy of Music.
Yes.
I mean, they've got a brand new,
they have the Kimmel Center.
Yeah, I've been there before.
Yeah,
it's a
that's
beautiful place.
Magnificent, but not like our grand old dame.
And didn't that have really raked seats? It's like in Chicago.
They had the nosebleed section.
Yeah, but at Symphony Hall in Chicago, it's you get in those balcony seats. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall over.
Oh yeah. But just those are the best memories of all. But we did go to every premiere that Ormandy had for Yardumian.
Yeah.
So, and that was very, very special too, because we got new dresses, new shoes.
Yeah, that must have been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yes, oh yeah, it was a very good life, and each of us had, you might be interested to know that we had 4 Steinway pianos.
Wow. And
we had a pump organ.
Yeah, now that's the one he went into the corner in his studio and worked from.
And we had an upright. So we had the Steinway upright in the dining room. We had a 5-1, or what Steinway calls an S, upstairs in our library. Then there was a 7, I think that was classified as a B. And then my dad had I think he got a 9. Let me see here. He had a 510 in his studio. And that was called an L by Steinway. That was its designation. The 7 was a Model B. And so we had the 4 pianos and an organ, but we ate on a ping pong table. And our chairs were the piano benches.
Oh, that's nice, yeah.
So by turns, there were upwards of 20 people at our dinner table.
Wow.
Nocturnally.
And the thing I wonder is, how did your mother do that? That's amazing. I don't know how people do that. I don't know how people do more than 3 kids.
Do you know, I am the 9th child. I'm often called Opus 9. And I have twin sisters who are numbers 10 and 11, who are 11 months younger than I am. So for 1 month every year, we're Irish triplets. But they're numbers 10 and 11. How did anybody do that? It's staggering to consider, and especially in today's world. But we didn't have the tethering of the cell phone that so many kids have now, and we were able to have a great deal of freedom growing up.
Yeah, because you lived far on the outskirts of Philadelphia.
Yeah, we were 12 miles
Like a
as the
country
crow
home.
flies.
Yeah.
And we lived on what was called Cold Spring Farm, but our street only had about 6 houses, and every house had, Marcucci's had 10 kids, and the
Wow.
Ferraris had 8, and we had, the Tenaris had 6. So a lot of Italians around us with beautiful homes, and we lived in a 26-room farmhouse that had a barn and a spring house.
Well, you'd
attached
have to,
it.
wouldn't you? I mean, you'd have to look for that sort of thing. To
Yeah,
accommodate.
but we held it up with LePage's glue and Band-Aids.
Yeah.
My dad's, when you live in a quarterly, I think he maybe got paid quarterly by ASCAP. So
Yeah.
some quarters were good and
Yeah.
some were not.
Depending on
when
how
you're
many
getting
performances,
royalties.
that's right. Yeah. Well, so it's such a wonderful, vivid life in the arts in Philadelphia. So what do you, like, you've moved down here, what do you see, and I am very grateful that you are a supporter of the Long Bay Symphony, as people in this area should. There's so many people who move from elsewhere, Philadelphia, or even, it doesn't have to be that size. There are loads of towns in the Northeast that have good symphony orchestras.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of these people have actually served on boards and or been involved in something. And it's like, and my favorite phrase is always, I've told the board members this, because invariably after a concert, we'll have someone new come and they will say, "Wow, you guys were great. I had no idea." And of course, from our perspective, we think, how could you have no idea?
How could you not know?
Yeah, but in this market where there's so much entertainment, it's hard to cut through that when you're a nonprofit. But I guess my point is there are people out there who've had this in their lives, and I suspect that many of them decide they're going to retire down here and they're not going to have the same things that they had where they were. And they can have many of those things, especially as this area grows. But I would really encourage folks to avail themselves of all that's out here. Symphony orchestra, art. There's loads of visual art around here, and the Carolina Master Chorale. There's theater.
Oh, yeah,
but it's out there, and I think that we're on a constant mission to get people involved. But let me just cut to one overriding and final question. So you moved here, and how do you see, as an active English teacher of high school kids, where do you see the arts going?
Ooh, that's a very difficult question to answer. I mean, I liken it unto where is the language going, because
we were talking about that.
I exhort my English students daily to climb the lexicographical ladder and raise climb up and don't, stay on the bottom rung. And it's the same with music. It's fine. And I'll liken it unto my saying to them, of course you can have your slang and your street language and all the language of the text. All of that is part of the expansion of the language. But there's also something to be said, not positively, about the deterioration of it. And the same is true of music. It's fine to have all different genre of music and to appreciate all those varying types of music, but you also have to know your standard English. You have to know your good music.
Right.
And so I would hope that in your enjoying and appreciating the varying, all the music that's out there for you, that you would look to the great, just like I would ask you to look to Shakespeare and Chaucer for the foundation and the building up of. You would do the same for music.
Right. Well, I liken that to the spoken word also. It's just, we all read informally. We read, magazines, or if we're on the plane, we'll just leaf through a flight magazine, or read, we used to read the funnies with the actual papers, But on the other hand, you read a novel, and a novel takes you much more in depth into something, and I think we all recognize that contrast. So yes, I agree. I listen to all kinds of music, and it's fun, but there's a certain higher purpose, And I think what goes hand in hand with that, with literature and music and many other things, is that it creates in you a continuity of thought. Mm-hmm. So that you're like, when you listen to a long, say an extended work, maybe a symphony, you are listening over an arch of perhaps several movements, yeah. And you're feeling how the whole thing progresses very much like a novel. And it reminds me, and I've probably said this in an earlier podcast, but I always remember this op-ed piece that this mother, who was a geologist and her husband was also in the sciences, wrote about their kids playing music. She said of her son, who was a horn player, she said, "Oh, he can study while he's got Facebook on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Got, other music playing, and he can do all this stuff and multitask, which is such a big deal. But when he practices his horn, that's all he's doing."
Oh, okay.
And I seized upon that because I think that's what's so important about it, is that, sports are wonderful.
Yes.
And they teach kids a lot of things about teamwork and about, being physically active and so many things. But there is something about being in the arts that has, focus and just a special sense of concentration that you don't get anywhere else. So I like to think that the more we get the word out and we support it, admittedly, I think it's harder to sustain it in an area that doesn't have the luxury of being a Philadelphia or a Boston or a Cleveland. But that doesn't mean we can't continue to build it, because people are moving here from other places such as that.
Right.
And if we just keep putting it out there, and I must admit, this area has grown tremendously. We've grown tremendously over the 20 plus years I've been here. But the school programs have gotten better and better.
Oh, yeah.
And we just have to stay vigilant on that in the same way we do with language standards and so on.
Yes, and I'll just say this last thing about my father's music, which was influenced. He had these several great models who influenced his style and his architecture of music. Not least Stokowski, who got him going, Jose Iturbi, who we didn't talk about, but also Philippe Monteau, who gave him the love for linear music and, counterpoint and polyphonic. They're all sort of the same thing, but each has its own voice. So that's what we're talking about. Each line has its own.
It's like a conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what he loved the most, and that is what he devoted his life to in his sacred choral work.
Yeah. Well, I think Richard Yardumian created really atmospheric works that just made sense and spoke so well during that time, with Ormandy championing all of that. And having that element of Armenian ethnicity and, as you say, the religious influence that
very much so.
I have to admit I haven't had the opportunity to do any of your father's things, and so when Ray and I were talking about this, it's like, yes, we definitely need to put something
certainly hope you will.
on the following season, 22-23 season.
Stay tuned for late breaking music.
But Esther, thanks so much for
you.
spending time with me and
I appreciate
having
it
us
so
learn a
much,
little bit
Maestro.
about your father, and we hope to see you at concerts
Oh,
now
you
that
know
we're
it.
back in the running.
I'll be there. I'll be the loudest clapper.
All right, we'll be right back. I'm always amazed at the number of interesting people in this community with ties to the classical music world, like Esther Yardumian-Smyth. Look for another episode of Speaking of the Arts soon, featuring more people and events in the regional arts scene. Until then, stay safe and keep listening.